pictures that he showed, but that gives you a sight of what the Sea of Galilee is. It's Luke calls it a lake, and we would probably view it as a lake because it would be smaller than Lake Marion, almost. You could see from one side to the other, and it really didn't matter where you were. You could always see all the other three shores, depending upon the angles and the land masses around. But today we're going to be looking at beginning Mark chapter 4, Lake Marion, verses 35 through 41. And allow me to read it to you this way, out of the English Standard Version. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in a boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care?" And he rebuked the wind and the sea, and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with a great fear, and said to one another, "Who then is this? Even the wind and the sea obey him." It's a very interesting passage as we look at it in our study today, in the sermon today. We opens up and we look and we see the disciples are in a storm, major storm, a storm that has come upon them all of a sudden. It was not expected. They did not see it coming. They had no weather forecasters telling them that it was going to be there. They just were out in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, and suddenly they were hit with one of these storms. We don't know if it was a tornado-type storm or what, but they were suddenly hit with a storm of life, and it just came upon them. And we can see them rowing that boat, trying to keep it under control. But maybe because you heard about the tornado thing, they're being twisted around and spun around. In addition, that water is coming into the boat. And so some of them have to put up their oars and find a bucket or use their hands or whatever to bucket the water out. And there's all this chaos going on around them. It's a very interesting scene. We do not know where that storm came from, if it was a natural cause or something else. You heard the statement that many believe that the Sea of Galilee, the demons lived in the bottom of it. But we also know from the text that if you go into chapter 5 of Mark, that Jesus was heading across the Sea of Galilee, and evidently he was going there to meet with the demoniac of Gennesaret. And so some have speculated that there were demonic powers in this event trying to keep Jesus from arriving to the other side. But we don't know which. The scriptures do not tell us. It just tells us a great wind came down. And it's a common phenomenon that we have. And he told the ones that come down from the Golan Heights are more dangerous than the ones that come off from the Jordanian side. But it's really rough. It causes a lot of trouble. And many sailors were lost over the years or were capsized as a result. So it was a real danger. There was real danger in the situation that they were in, that they were facing at this time. But on the other hand, regardless whether the storm was natural or spiritually caused, we see Jesus as the Son of God there. And we look at it, and we could think about it. Jesus, he had just got finished teaching the multitude by the Sea of Galilee, where the crowd was there, and he was preaching, and he's the one who told them to go across the other side. Now, as God, we know that he was aware of the coming storm. Whether it was demoniac or whether it was natural, he would have been aware that it was going to hit them. But yet, he sent them out across the lake. Not only that, we find that he must have been, we get the sense he'd been teaching a lot and doing a lot of things, and he went to the back of the boat where there was a cushion, a place of honor in the boat, and he laid down to rest on that cushion. It was probably a cushion that went across the whole bench, and it was usually where the oarman would sit, or not the oarman, but the rudderman would sit and guide the rudder. So he was blocking whoever was working the what is it again? Rudder. He'd been blocking whoever was just. So this ship is literally rudderless, no guide. So he's sitting there sleeping. He's actually preventing them from being able to guide the boat, and they are in a state of panic. You'd think that's kind of odd. Here he is. He's resting. He's blocking them from getting to the rudder. He's in their way, in a sense. And they come to him, and they wake him up. And notice what their question is. Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Do you not care that we are perishing? They were certain the boat was going to go under in a few minutes. And here Jesus was not lifting a finger to help them as far as they could see. Now, theologically, we could go and think a little bit and say, hey, they should have been aware that Jesus was approved by God and God was protecting Jesus and that he wasn't going to let anything happen to him. And so, therefore, they should have been okay. They should have realized things were going to work out. But sometimes that's just not the case. We get so hit and we get so wrapped up in the situation that we think everything's going to fall apart on us. And we get frustrated because we sense or we don't see God doing anything to help us. In fact, at times it may even look like he's in our way. He's preventing us from getting to the rudder to help guide the boat away from the storm or out of the storm or stabilize the boat during the storm. And it's totally frustrating for us. We have these type of situations in our lives. And it's interesting when we look at it. If you go back to Mark chapter 1, we don't have a lot of description here, but Mark chapter 1, verse 12 and 13, it says this. This is right after the baptism. Jesus is baptized, he's commissioned for his work, and then we hit verse 12. The Spirit immediately drove him out into the wilderness, and he was in the wilderness 40 days, being tempted by Satan. So here we find a spiritual situation where Jesus himself is pushed by the Spirit, pushed into a situation whereby he's exposed to the temptations of the Satan himself. I thought God was supposed to help us and be there for us and always guide us through all different things. It's kind of odd to see God putting Jesus into a position of temptation. Jesus sending the disciples into a storm. How can that be? Why should that be? Yet we do the same thing within our own culture, especially within our military. What does the military do to young recruits? What's the first thing they go to? Boot camp. And there you have a lot of friendly mother figures known as drill sergeants who speak very kind words to the recruits and encourage the recruits and are just very helpful in teaching them all sorts of new skills, right? No, they put the pressure on them. They make life miserable for the recruits. All so that those souls, and what's the purpose of all this? Is it out there to cause the recruits to have a heart attack, to die of thirst, to just break them? Yes, it is there to break them, but is it to completely break them? No, there is a purpose in that. And we sometimes, think about it, Jesus, why does God do these things? And we have to reflect upon this. We know God knows all things. And we see that Jesus even arises when they call upon him out of their desperation. He does intervene. He's not like the drill sergeant after the soldiers have come through the gas chamber and they've had to pull their mask off to come out, takes the soldier and throws him back into the gas chamber and have him deal with it. God is a little different. Jesus, he gets up, he calms the sea, he rebukes the sea, he rebukes the wind, and all is calm. But he does also rebuke them. And he says to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" Now let's look at that statement. Have you still no faith? They had seen Jesus heal blind people. They had seen Jesus heal leopards. They had seen Jesus do all sorts of things in healing people with paralytic hands and all sorts of other things. They knew the power of God was with him, and yet they still had little faith or no faith. You see, one of the things that happens in life, when we go through troubles, and God knows that they're there, and sometimes he sends them our way on purpose, and sometimes we create them ourselves, and sometimes they just happen to us. It doesn't really matter the source of those troubles. They're troubles. Some of those troubles are long-term and frustrate us for a long period of time. But they do something. They can be used for constructive purposes. Many a father has told a child after they've gone through some trouble and asked a simple question, "What have you learned?" And that's part of growing up and being mature, is realizing that troubles help us learn. I mean, we call spiritual testing, just like academic testing, because it tests us to see what we know or what our knowledge and where our gaps are. So the first thing we find out, we can think about here, is that these troubles come our way, and that during these times of troubles, they show us things about ourselves, about who we are, about our own weaknesses and strengths. There may be a character flaw that we have, and so we may have a lack of patience. And so during the time of trouble, our lack of patience comes out. And we realize that and have to begin realizing that we need to be able to persevere, and in perseverance, endure and have the right spirit. Maybe as in this case, it showed a lack of faith. They kind of already knew who Jesus was. Many of them were Jesus' relatives and knew him since he was a little child. And yet they knew God was with him and God had a special purpose for them. And they were still afraid that God would not deliver Jesus and as a result deliver them. So they had a lack of faith. Or it may be an incorrect belief that we had. I remember there's a story many years ago, late 1800s, there was a massive flood in Louisiana. This is before Katrina. Way long ago. And there was this massive flood in a certain area of Louisiana. And there was this one house that was in this area that was just up a hill that was a little higher than all the other areas around it. And the waters came by that house and came right up to the porch of that house. And wild animals started coming into the house. Domestic animals started coming in, till this house was just full of not only animals, but also people who were caught in the flood, and they would float over and swim over to the house and get in. But there were some people who came and where they swam to the house. And when they got to the porch, they looked up and they saw the owner of the house reaching down to save them, reaching out his hand to grab them and pull them up onto it to safety. And they realized that he was the owner of the house was an African American, and they did not want to accept any help from an African American. And they died. They would not reach out and grab. And as a result, they drowned because they let the current take them on down. Some people, that character flaw or belief system that they had actually kept them from being saved that day physically. So these things reveal a lot about ourselves. Now, once we recognize these things in our lives, we need to ask ourselves, what is God revealing to us? Just like Jesus was pointing out to the disciples, I am with you. You had no reason to be afraid right now. In fact, later in another passage, he talks about how his disciples weren't fasting because he, the bridegroom, the Messiah, was with them. Now, there may be a day that they would fast because he would be taken away from them. But he was there, present with them. They could trust him. So when we come and we realize what is it that this is revealing about us, what is it that is frustrating us, and then we can, at that point, turn to God and seek his help to overcome whatever it is. If it's a character flaw of not having enough patience, if it's a lack of faith, if it's an incorrect belief, let us seek God's help to overcome these weaknesses of faith, these weaknesses in moral flaws, or even in incorrect beliefs, and conform our ways to the teaching of the Word. Begin to seek his ways and seek his face and depend upon him. No matter who or what we are, he is there for us. And it's very interesting that when trials, how does an athlete get ready for a sporting event? What does he do to his body? Paul describes it as beating and molding it into submission. You know, you go and you lift weights. A weightlifter lifts weights until he can't lift them anymore. Why? So that he can go and then compete in weightlifting better. I remember in high school, the high school that I graduated from had a winning football team, and I wasn't on it. But I remember one day I was sitting there I was in homeroom, I think it was, and all of a sudden all the girls got up and were looking out the window. Oh, look, there's so-and-so, which kind of got my curiosity. So I went and kind of looked over them, and there was one of the football players, a young football player. He really wasn't that much bigger than me. But the thing I noticed was that he was outside free-lifting some weights that were about this big around. Now, he may have gone outside on purpose because he knew there was a bunch of girls in that window. But he was sitting there showing off his strength by lifting up those heavy weights. And as a result, the football team had a lot of very strong guys in it. And they practiced hard, and they were in the state championship. I don't remember. I didn't keep track of all that stuff back then. Probably should have, but anyways. They did well because they practiced and they drove their bodies to the limits during practice so that during the actual game, they could go through the whole 9 yards. And the same is so for us as Christians. Many times difficulties come our way to help us grow in our faith. Paul says we grow from faith to faith. You know, our faith should become stronger. And each time we overcome a challenge, we realize that we can overcome it and we can overcome a bigger challenge. You can't start out lifting the big, heavy weights if you can't lift a 1-pound dumbbell. You have to begin and work your way up, and you become stronger and stronger. And that's the same with our faith. As we grow. And Jesus at this point, he's going to have these disciples do a lot of things. There's going to be a time that they won't see him. There'll be a time that they're out facing persecution and other challenges. But here he was preparing them for that work one day in the future. And that included going through a storm. In fact, they had to go through a storm like this more than once until they finally learned the lessons. And sometimes that's the way it is for us in our lives. We go through storms. Who knows what the cause is? We don't know. Sometimes it may be our own stupidity. Sometimes it may be the stupidity of other people. Sometimes it may even be the hostility of other people. And sometimes it may be God has sent it, or who knows what, where it comes. They're inevitable in this life. Difficult times are inevitable. But we should use each difficulty as an opportunity to seek to know ourselves better, to know our weaknesses and strengths better, to go to God and ask for his guidance and learn from them so that we can handle those situations better, but more importantly, grow deeper in our faith as he enables us to overcome each obstacle one at a time. Amen.